Hello, my name is Damayanthi Niles. I am the professor of constructive theology at Eden Seminary, and I am a teaching elder with our Presbytery, Giddings-Lovejoy. It is an honor for me to be here today, and I want to have a conversation with you about mission history and what it can teach us. For those of you who are interested, there's an outline of this presentation that was sent out by the Presbytery along with this video. The overview of the modern missionary movement can be sort of broken into three periods, what we call three generations. And it kind of helps you take the arc of what mission was about. The first time period, or this first generation, starts with the voyage of Columbus in 1492 and ends with World War II, a pretty large time period. And it's called the Vasco da Gama era. The events that go with it, unsurprisingly, if you think of it with Columbus, was European colonialism, the rise of capitalism, and the modern missionary movement. This is really when Christianity expanded. And unsurprisingly, the image or metaphor that goes with it is in just that, expansion. The desire to shape the universe toward Western civilization. The language of this expansion was really coined by the Catholic theologian Robert Schreiter. The church's response during the first generation falls really under this universalizing paradigm. We want to go and bring the great unwashed into the baptized, true civilized believer. The characterizations of this time period is saving souls, planting churches all over the world, and civilizing the heathen of the world to good Christian believers. The biblical warrant of this time is the one we often call the Great Commission. And often my students talk to me about this is our Great Commission. I'm like, there are many commissions in the Bible. We decided this was great because it fit our model. And that was Matthew 28, 18 and 19. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority of heaven and on earth has been given me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." The things to note about this generation is that it's not just empire building and imperialism. It was the variety of ways church and mission situated themselves vis-a-vis imperialism. We understood ourselves as the ministers to the monarchs. We cared for their holy souls and we helped them bring others under them. So we became, as King James would say, children of Scotland or England or name your country. The instruments of resistance also existed. So during this time we had revolutions, the building of nation movements, countries wanting to reclaim their own space in time. The understanding of selfhood was also moving at this time and really helps break us into the second generation of missiologies. The time period of this generation is the end of World War II till the end of the Cold War, or when the fall of Berlin, the Berlin Wall happens, which is 1989. The events of this time were the ending of colonized empires. India got independence, as did many of the Asian nations. By the 70s, the African nations were independent as well. As Latin America started taking its own space back. This then led to the growth of non-aligned movements. So you have NATO and Warsaw politically, but you also have Pan-Africa conversations and Asian conversations, and the Latin Americans speaking as nations themselves. The metaphor of this time, again from Schreiter, is that of solidarity. We work in groups together, making things happen. The church's response was to move from the idea of foreign mission to mission in 6 nations, which is why you have the Asia desk, the Africa desk, and so forth. So the global ministries works in areas, and we have people seated in spaces connecting with those continents. The character of this time in the church was accompaniment, contextualization, solidarity, and partnership. So you often hear of people going and working with their partner churches in other parts of the world. By 1970s, justice, peace, and liberation became key terms to where the church was going. Unsurprisingly, then the commission of this time was Luke 4:18 and 19. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim the release of captives, to recover the sight of the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Things to note of this time was how the churches were coming together as alliances. So you have the World Council of Churches, which was created out of the Faith and Order movement, and what we call Life and Works, which is really started with the international missionary societies coming together to create the World Council of Churches. In Asia, you had the East Asian Christian Conference, the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference. Here you had the National Councils of Churches coming about, the European Councils of Churches. All of this was happening in that time period. In China, all the missionaries were kicked out, and a self-governing church under communism came into being. So the illusion that there was no church in China is not true. There wasn't a church in China run by us, which is a very different vision. I often smile because when friends say, I'm taking Bibles to China because I don't have any, it often means they stuff their Bibles, stuff a bunch of English Bibles into their suitcases and smuggle them to China. The Chinese church has been making millions of Bibles in the Chinese language all this time. Feels a bit like taking coals to Newcastle, I think. Move into the 3rd generation of missiology. That is the generation we are in now, and that is from 1989 to the present. The Berlin Wall has fallen, there's a collapse of communism, the USA is the only superpower. The characterizations of this time is there's no viable alternative political or economic space. The market is the market. It is run by power. It is the global market. It's global capitalism and neoliberal democracy. Both of these become the kingpins. So what you will notice with COVID, the problem is the market that we knew how to run and how to run the world cannot function. We're coming apart. New options have to be made. The way we've tried to run the world doesn't work anymore. And we find ourselves in a much more fractured space. The language of communication and networking have now started to become a case as people start to find their own spaces and ways of doing things. The metaphors used in connection with this is communication and networking. How do we connect across difference? The image of this period is mission under globalization. and competing and negotiating missiologies. You will find that we often talk about the evangelicals doing mission versus the liberals doing mission versus the conservatives doing mission, the African vision of mission versus the Asian vision of mission. All of these are competing forms, and they're all in conversation with each other, or not. The church's response is not clearly worked out yet. This is the work we step into right now. I would advise that we pick up on the idea of communication or dialogue. What do you have to do to be in authentic conversation? Not to lecture over or become silenced by, but to be actual equal conversation partners, to exist in a state of conversation. The reason or purpose we connect means different things to different people. I would ask us to think about perhaps how do we make dialogue the very reason for being? Not like our Presbytery meetings where we have conversations to get to an end, but the end is to actually be able to stay in conversation. To be able to hear all. Not to indulge all, but to hear all and hear what each brings as gift and each brings as problematic to the conversation. To resist the need for a meta-narrative. It is very tempting with the way we see the world and the work of God as one narrative. God wants this one thing to happen. What if God wants many things to happen? What if there are many things that need to happen and we do not do it in one singular, linear conversation? What would that mean? Things to remember when we're trying to do this work is this. One, we live in a plural world. There are many of us doing many things, and to be able to see it all is actually the most liberative thing. Because to have a single narrative, you have to destroy or silence those who do not have the power to insert their voice. So what does it mean to actually take seriously multiple voices? Not as a laissez-faire relativism, but as an authentic justice move. A second thing to note is the models from the first and second generation still have validity. They're still at work. We see them at work all the time. But now they're encountering more and more difficulties. There are also many issues to address. Ecumenism, as a League of Christian Nations, has become stagnant, perhaps because there is more than the Christian nations that we need to be in conversation with. And the trying to pull them together in one meta-narrative is not working. There's always a questioning of genuine dialogue with others. How do we do it? How do we make our voices heard? How do we listen better? All of that has to be worked out and negotiated by us. Liberation, as we have understood it, which is we work with God to bring liberation to the world, is questioned because what we may find liberative may not be liberative somewhere else. And to actually find out what liberation means and how to help empower it is important. The final thing to remember is the issues, as we know well, of justice, peace, and liberation are more intense than ever. So finding a new way to address it so they're actually addressed is very important. As we know, we cannot say peace, peace, where there is no peace. And our idea of liberation may not be liberative. So we have to go to different spaces to figure that out. The solutions of the past are no longer compelling. The terror of that is what we have to find are solutions for the present and the future. We learn from our past, hence the study of this history. but we walk into a future. But we do not walk it alone. We walk it with God. Thank you for your patience.
I get to unmute myself, so I'm not sure if I get to be. Yeah, hey, it's two screens again. So it's good to be with everyone. Wonderful to be in worship and to celebrate this time together. We have an opportunity right now for a conversation with Dr. Niles about what she was able to put together, and hopefully everybody had a chance to view the video ahead of time and also look at the outline. And so we have a handful of questions from folks in the Presbytery that we're going to be asking, but also if you have questions right now, don't be afraid to put it into the chat box. We'll do our best to address those as well. So first of all, welcome. We're glad that you are with us and sharing your expertise. And to have a 14, 15-minute video covering mission history is ambitious, and so good attempt there at that. We appreciate that kind of introduction. And as we kind of get underway, I thought I would give you, before I ask any questions, a chance to share any first thoughts that you have, or anything that from the video that you wanted to expand on or to highlight.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. I sort of put what I wanted into the video. I was given this work by Craig Howard before he cheerfully marched off to do other things, which he has a tendency to do. But my imagination is, we know how to go forward if we remember what we've done in the past. And that's why the video is what it is. And as we start to imagine who we're meant to be as Christians in relationship to people of faiths around the world, how do we do that? So that's really, and if you notice, my query and my frustration is, we're always trying to get everybody onto our page. And how do we now become actual partners with the world to do the work of God, I think, is the work that is upon us. But this is really your time. I did my time and put it on a video. So if there are questions and stuff, it'll be fun. It was fun to talk to Dave yesterday. We have more common history than we ever thought we did.
Yes.
Because we both have connections with the church in South India and in Asia, and that was really great.
Yeah, no, that made my day. We had the conversation that the same boarding school that my parents went to and where they met was where Dr. Niles had spent many years as well. So it's a small world when your God is big, I guess. So the one thing you mentioned right there is actually ties onto one of the questions we got is what should we call mission? Is the words are always charged. And so when we hear, I've heard it say that grace is the last best word we have, because it is the one that's not tampered with as much. But even the word mission, I recognize, has some baggage. And so you mentioned in saying, you use the word partner, or use the word, or the idea of walking alongside. So is there a better word than mission? Is partnership better? What's a good way to view this, and how we should move forward?
That's a brilliant question. I am two minds about it. One, I am kind of tired of other people hijacking words for their purpose. And every word we use gets reinterpreted by others, and we let it go. And I think there's a point of reclaiming our words for what they're actually meant to be. And for me, the word mission simply means doing theology contextually and doing it practically. So it's contextual theology, it's practical theology, it's good old-fashioned ministry. And I think those are, and if we can reinfuse mission with that vision, I think we'll have a healthier understanding of
our work in ministry.
Good stuff. In fact, even that kind of harkens back a little bit to some of the things we talked about last night with the need of even the word evangelicalism, or evangelism, of reclaiming what that means at its core, not the way it has been usurped, the way in many ways it has been in a quest for power has lost authority of what those words mean. And I guess that kind of gets into another question is, when we look at mission, if we're going to ask the average person in the pew, or we're going to ask the average, the average Presbyterian, I guess, too, how do we find the definition of mission? For some, they're going to say it's about saving souls, or bringing light into, get the John passages of bringing light into darkness, which has a certain arrogance as well, I recognize. And then the other side of that, where mission for many look at more of strictly a helping ministry, or a way to build schools or build roads or hospitals, etc. Would you be willing to speak for a moment on how we can understand the implementation of that?
I think that's a very good question. I think the word that you used, arrogance, the arrogance that we have the light to give other people is, first of all, un-Presbyterian. If you need to be anything else, I think we understand our broken and sinfulness to know that this lamp won't carry light. It will carry scattered light. And the vision that really, as we talked about in the second generation, the words of Missio Dei, right? The work that is done by God. What we do is follow it. And the fact is, we may not be carrying light, we may be walking toward the light. And the light may not be even in the church or even with Christians. The point is, we're searching for God in pilgrim with others who search for God. And the fact is, we may be in darkness and others will shed light upon us. That widens the vision, doesn't it? I think it was Ambemung, the Korean theologian, he said, "I do not believe in an invalid God that needed to be carried to Korea on the back of some missionary. I believe that God was alive and well in Korea long before the missionary came. What the missionary did was give me different language, not correct language, not truth language, different language. Sometimes you need to have your stuff looked at by somebody else. Like, did you notice? Did you realize? So all of us are part of God's image and are seekers of God's. We're pilgrims together that carry light, share light, and distribute light, because that original light comes from something else. So rather than being arrogant, maybe we should be curious.
I like that. The move from arrogance to curiosity, from certainty to embracing the mystery, in some ways of what is our faith in, which has been a struggle in the history of the church to do that. You mentioned and kind of building off something you just mentioned, it reminded me of maybe something you heard at PTS as well, which was, it always stuck with me, that Jesus preached the kingdom, but the church came instead. So is looking at kind of going through the 3 generations of mission that you had talked about in your presentation, has mission been more about building the church or building the kingdom? Or are there times where that has been one or the other has been lifted up more?
I think it's been both, and I have no issues. I have issues with building a kingdom.
Yeah.
God has already built a creation. We don't need a kingdom. Mm-hmm. It may be a broken creation, but God's already done. It's sort of like, we're going to build a house because God already built a house. Mm-hmm. What's the point? And for you, Dave, as for me, since we spent so much time in the church that's outside the church that we know in the Presbyterian church or in America. We have seen the church. More importantly, we have seen God at work, period. And that, so I find myself in a much more comfortable place. And I assume you do too, that what God is doing is not confined to what we think the kingdom is or what we think the church is. Because God doesn't need us, we need God.
Mm.
Right? So, and yes, you're right. I will claim my heresy. I am a mystic. I am a soul. I just think God is a mysterious, wonderful being that I will never know. As I tell my students, once you've got your theology right, you fail. Right? And that is what helps us forward. So you're always looking. So rather than bringing about the kingdom or planting, let's go and live in the sacred world that is God, that is bleeding. It's a both hand.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bleeding world that God made. So let's be part of that rather than have so much surety that we can. I don't like kingdom. I'm a post-colonialist. I come from colonized countries. Building kingdoms, whether you spell it with a G or not, it's still a kingdom. Call it a kingdom, call it a kingdom, call it what you want, but that's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's getting in the way of God. And I find out when I fight with God, God wins. So let's just not do that.
Yeah, well, and it reminds me of Jacob, right? You know, if you start doing that at some point, there might be a blessing somewhere in there, but you're going to walk away limping as well. So good thoughts. I think even kind of what you were sharing a little bit of what we talked about last night is, you know, the idea of going someplace else to do mission is the question. There's also the thing about what we learn in those places and how we return and how we are changed and how we come back in maybe less certain about the way we once were, but that too is a reminder that the journey is not about we are to be baptized in moving water. We're not to be baptized in stagnant, still water as well. So we had a couple of questions here that talked about a little about capitalism in the church, a little bit about kind of. We had an earlier question too that kind of ties into that. I think a little bit of that imperialism of bringing. Not just Jesus, but a lot of other baggage or a lot of other things alongside. Would you speak to that perhaps on maybe how that has, certainly I know in different periods, it's been certainly higher than others. Maybe a little about the history of that and then perhaps where we are right now, where you see us right now.
So the second generation of mission that really sort of got kicked off and moved into and still runs into the third, where you have the I'm looking at my notes because it's tough to have your notes, that really has us with one superpower, one option economically, and is problematic. And Julio De Santano says it beautifully. Says the problem is the goods have become the good, right? What we do, what we make, what we are is more important than the human relationships. And COVID has stripped us right to that place, right? And people want to get together because our economy is dying. People are dying. Creation is breaking its heart because it cannot be but 6 feet away from somebody, right? So we need to imagine how we can be 6 feet apart from each other and our hearts still speak, right? We're Presbyterians. We're one OCD and we are task oriented. And I promise you, Carl will now start a meeting where we're going to get tasks done. We have forgotten how to speak just for the joy of getting to be able to love each other. And we speak always economically. And then, a Presbyterian, well, actually he's UCC, of some note, Walter Brueggemann said, America is run on legislation and economy. And we have fallen victim to that. Perhaps it's time to think about other ways to think about who we are. When does the good become more than the goods? Not to make the goods bad. Mm-hmm. Don't go to dualism, but what else is there? What about beauty? What about connection? What about art? What about science? All these other ways of connecting. I always say economically, I hate going to malls, but I love going to markets. Because there you're talking to the vendor, you're figuring out what they've been up to. And you know, when I'm in India or in Sri Lanka, hell, most countries, I have my fruit vendor, I have the butcher that I know, and I know his son, and I know it's relationships where we're trading stuff and connection. In a mall, you're buying a sock. You know, it's just humanless. And we have allowed that humanless to decide how to be good. That ain't good.
Your comment made me laugh because I remember I was talking to my dad last night after our conversation, and he talked about being a third culture kid. And what I'm in my head, in my mind's eye, I remember back the times being overseas and watching dad bargain with people. And just the joy of that exchange, and for us, it makes us uncomfortable. To those, we want to know certainty. We want to know this is what it costs. This, and maybe that's something about discipleship too. It's like we want to know exactly how much we have to put in, you know, and that's less of a question when you go to the bazaar, when you go to the market.
Yeah. And it's not about the cost. And you know, good, but I always used to laugh. My mother is an amazing barterer. She could get the money, and then you pay what you really should pay, not what you bartered for, which is normally a lot more than what you bought. But the bartering is about discourse, exchange, seeing the human being, not just the thing. Yeah. And I miss that. I went to the University of Chicago, and I always went to my friends who were fruit vendors to get my vegetables and fruit. And it was always the case, oh, somebody brought this, and there's new apples here. And you never went and bought fruit. You went and had fun with the vendor. And when people talk to me, it's the same thing. Let's share who we are and share our gifts with each other, not about things, about us. Because come on. What is life but relationships? Kenneth Cracknell wrote a book, A Good and Generous Faith. And one of the chapters, he's a wonderful word. He says, what does my heart say to your heart? When we are exchanging at that level, then maybe we're doing something more.
Good stuff. In fact, I think in terms of, you kind of touched on that. It's all heightened all the more in COVID, you know, as certain things were much easier to do. But I think everybody who is currently or has been in pastoral ministry will echo this, that there is that sacred space we're missing, and that sacred space can be the coffee in the conversation before or after the service. You know, the sacred space can be just where we are gathered in dialogue, and some level of that also requires, I know, vulnerability, and it requires authenticity and courage to be in there. You know, so one thing that a question we had was about toxic charity, and I was thinking about mission, and much of mission is defined in the United States as something we pay somebody else to do, or it's something that says we're going to go on short-term mission projects, and the idea of that we will parachute in, parachute out, save souls, build a roof, whatever. Would you want to share any thoughts about toxic charity, or kind of the move that mindset can create.
Toxic charity is laziness to make relationships. We want to go get a job done and get it out because I don't want to really relate to the person. I just want to fix the damn roof, right? Or I want to make sure I did this good thing and I'm done. First of all, it's patronizing. Second of all, it's like, I want to do something without ever having to deal with you. So what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to have a relationship, don't have it. And, do whatever you need to feel better about that. But don't belittle the other people in the relationship, right? Talkative charity, talkative mission is about functionality, not about communion and relationality. And I don't know, what I learned about church from Giddings-Lovejoy was it's about relationships. So we're not about relating to the world. We're there to get a job. And I understand all of us have jobs that we want to get done. But if the job overtakes the relationship, the job is not worth it.
Yeah. Good stuff. We've got a few more minutes in. I was going to say, I learned from Giddings-Lovejoy about the administrative ministry, so I still have that book up on my wall back over here. So, a quick question is, we can perhaps somebody who's listening can put it into the chat bar. One or two books that have sparked your imagination on the subject matter and that may spark ours as well.
Well, some of the old chestnuts that are wonderful is A New Catholicity by Robert Schreiter. I mean, he's one of the old books. That book is to missiology what the commentary to the Romans by Karl Barth is to biblical studies. It's one of the old chestnuts, mm-hmm. which I love. The other crumbs, I don't have it on the Donald Dorr. I can't remember the title of the book. I can send it to the Presbytery office. I'm going to be honest. I'm really shaped by the Asian theologians. Also shaped by anything Raymond Panikkar writes, I think is brilliant, just because it's Raymond Panikkar. Aloysius Piris is another one. This sounds self-serving and it's not meant to, but Prema Niles' book From East and West really question. He's a practitioner, Old Testament scholar, and he really pushes some of that vision. From East and West is his book on mission that I use quite a bit in my classes. Those would be just a handful.
Sure.
Never ask a professor about books. We can give you 2,000.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. It's a spiritual gift. I think maybe as we're kind of wrapping up with a couple more minutes, the question might be, what's a good first step, or what's a good start in this? And so again, we're now talking not to get necessarily to, let's get a long list. We're talking to Presbyterians, so this is a very difficult way to get outside of task or bullet points or do anything decently in order. But maybe what is a jumping off point to this newly imagined or imagining things differently, and then following where that leads us?
I think the step is, rather than stop trying to do stuff and start trying to look for God in the places where you think God might not be. And I mean, in other faiths, in other peoples, start being a pilgrim. Go to the sacred rather than trying to carry the sacred to people. We're people on journeys, we're pilgrims, going to sacred places and seeing God there. And God looks different in Lodz. God looks different in the Himalaya Mountains. God looks different at Canterbury. And God looks different at the Giddings-Lovejoy Presbytery. Go looking for God rather than going and figuring out. Stop being so Know with your heart and your spirit rather than the logic of your mind. And this is a professor saying that. Go be curious, be imaginative, be ready to find new things. And I'm pretty sure God will meet you in that pilgrimage. And so will God's people. And I think that's what our work is. And that's what makes it fun, really. That's what really makes it fun. And that's true whether you're going abroad or if you're going to your parish. With that kind of spiritual mindset will let you find God, because you're not trying to figure out what God is. You're trying to let God tell you and the world tell you.
I don't have time to look up the quote. Somebody else will probably check me in the chat box, but the old saying that if you found God too easily, or perhaps it's not God that you found, it's
yeah.
It's
if you found God easily, you found a peace.
Yeah.
Which is great. But there's more. There's always more. The mystics will tell you there's always more.
Amen. Amen. But we are Augustine. There we go. We'll take on.
Thank you, Dieter.
Yes, I just got to throw that out there, and that's what I love about Presbyterians. They'll finish that off. So we are at the time. I want to say thank you so much for the work that you've done in seminary, other places, the expertise that you shared in the video in this conversation. I am looking forward to COVID being over so I can enjoy some curry without coriander with you.
Yes.
And but it is a blessing to have you with us. And I think, let me look to see if I'm the one who then yes, we do have a break that started 1 minute ago. So thank you all as well for this, and God's blessings on you all.
Amen.